Super. Thank you. And in addition to the four speakers, presenters earlier, Till, Ian, Oscar, and Carolus, it's my great pleasure to welcome two additional panelists for this round. Cécile Gouache. Cécile is a consultant working on the European Commission's ISA2 program, mainly around issues and actions of legal interoperability and e-procurement. Now, Cécile is quite active, contributing to several standardization organizations in the procurement domain, and she has quite extensive experience in designing blocks of the procurement system for the European Commission. And also a big welcome to Natalie Muric. Natalie manages the ontology project at the Publications Office of the European Union, where she has worked for nearly 20 years. Before that, she was at the European Commission's Directorate in General Agriculture and Rural Development, as well as the Directorate General Employment and Social Affairs. Natalie now coordinates the standardization of public procurement data within the Publications Office. Welcome both. Thank you very much for taking the time this morning. It's excellent to have you on board. And now really is the time for our attendees to throw any questions at the panel around the recommendations that Oscar has presented. Everything that's been mentioned by Ian and Carolus. Shoot away, either in the chat function or raise your hand and then unmute you. While people are thinking of questions, one of the immediate questions I've had listening to your presentation, Carolus, and Ian, obviously, perhaps just to get it started, I'd personally be quite curious how you view the long-term effect of COVID, not so much in terms of obviously the big bump in economic activity and public spending, but behavioral patterns and certain behaviors that are coming back, that are creeping back in. When I think of say procurement practices in the UK in particular, and to what extent do you feel will this have a negative impact on things we have been discussing beyond the immediate economic effects?
Carolus, do you want to go first on that? Or... Well, Julian, shall I go?
Please do, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we literally today, the National Audit Office here in the UK has published a report identifying the fact that we in the UK spent £10 billion on PPE, 10 billion additional pounds on PPE that could have been saved if we had either prepared or done a better job of purchasing during the pandemic. Having said that, it's obvious that there is a great deal of sympathy for the buyers who were put in a situation where they had to find equipment at very short notice, and every country was yanking on the same sort of rather torn supply chains. But I think it really is interesting that in our report, we recently published a report with TheyBuyForYou on pandemic procurement across Europe. Not every country has taken the route that the UK did. So, for example, in some countries, there has actually been less direct award purchasing than there was the year before. So to them, the management and purchasing of equipment has been almost as normal through the pandemic. And what we see in the UK is a very aggressive move towards direct awards at the same time as trying to avoid oversight. I can't put it. And I think that is particularly worrying. On the other hand, there's plenty in Europe to celebrate. And it really does depend what kind of administration you've got. If you've got an administration that cherishes the procurement regulations as a good way of managing public money, and doesn't see it as a barrier, then actually you get a different result. If you have an administration that, I mean, I think it's well documented that some significant figures in the UK government, ministers in the UK government have taken a very dim view of EU procurement regulations in the past, and they just go, we're going to ignore them. We're going to push forwards and do, this is what you get. And so the real question is, do we have a slow return to normality, or has this opened up the gates to ongoing cronyism? I like to think that that things will go back to the way they were in most cases, but I significantly fear that as the UK leaves the EU, that a little bit of our procurement integrity has gone forever. And I don't know whether we'll, you know, I had heard plans for the government wished to change the regulations on procurement to allow it, to make it easier to award contracts without going to tender once we'd left the EU. And I sincerely hope that isn't what we do, but I suspect it's going to be a long time before we change this pattern of behaviour and this downward trend. I mean, you can have less process if you have greater transparency, but I think oversight is something they don't want. So wait and see, but yeah, I'm not hopeful.
How do other panelists feel? Do they share the sentiment? We have a suggestion that Lithuania obviously has been leading the beacon, doing well in awarding, publishing awards, publishing Netherlands and corporate contracts. What's the outlook other panelists have?
So I can share the work. I mean, I know I also see Victor around here from Zaragoza that they were trying to do in order to provide additional information related to COVID-19 and all the expenses that they were doing. They acknowledge, I mean, that probably the information is not complete because they couldn't really chase everything yet that was happening over there. But I mean, I can just share over here in the chat the link to the portal that they developed specifically in order to provide information to citizens and to other organizations and in the city in order to, I mean, related to COVID-19 contracts, to also the analysis that they were doing, invoices that were related and so on. So all these can be navigated. Obviously, it's in Spanish, yeah, because that was the main target. But they were also even doing some analysis of the reduction that they may have in terms of taxes and I mean income, yeah, for the city. So I mean, if one goes over there, you can just play around and you will see also with the visualizations that they have been preparing for the general purpose contracts. Also the ones that have been identified as being related to that. So, I mean, an analysis could be done on that. Yeah, they have not done it. I know that they have not been really like doing a further analysis on that, but they have just been publishing it. Yeah.
Super. Thank you very much, Oscar. Anyone else who wants to share their views on this particular issue? Or in fact, from our attendees, do you have any, know that you've worked through our Oscar's 10 recommendations? What do you make of them? Do you have anything to add? Do you feel anything is missing? What are your views?
I think that, I mean, like I just wanted to have a view, yeah, on which are the most pressing things, yeah, that people consider. I mean, it was kind of a very open thing, yeah. But mostly, I mean, I was expecting that publishing in a structured format was one of the key ones that would appear, yeah, as the key ones. And also, I mean, I'm surprised on the reusing your data, but I also saw that Carolis was actually commenting on this, yeah, as well. So I mean, we can see that I mean, like from the points that we have over here, probably visualizations or this idea of texts in raw format, but not so well understood. I mean, for me, for instance, the text in raw format could be something that I would have loved to have at the very beginning of the project, yeah, just to provide those added value services that we could generate. I mean, like even to make the administrations more efficient, yeah? I mean, like just imagine somebody working on a contracting department, filling in some tenders, and being able to identify other tenders in other cities, in other regions, and things alike, so that you can also see the companies, the organizations that have been bidding. Then you may immediately contact them and say, okay, well, this could be something relevant for you as well. Yeah, why not? I think that this could be something nice. I mean, I'm surprised on this low, but low value over there. But I mean, it's also nice, yeah, just to see the results. I'm not sure. I mean, like there was a second poll that we had. I mean, we can probably close this one and go to the next one, which was actually like asking for any recommendation missing. I mean, we can just keep it over there for a while, just to see whether anybody is really thinking of something that they couldn't live without. I mean, the answers will start appearing over there if anybody wants to add in something there. Mm-hmm.
Actually, Carolus has his hand up. Carolus, please.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just wanted to very quickly share my experience from conversations with more than maybe 10, 12 governments in the European Union, is that, you know, it takes a lot for them to actually learn how to deliver on these recommendations, you know, because there's e-forms reform going on, and that's the most and closest to their skin, of course, because that's going to be a legal obligation to implement that in the next 2 years. At the same time, you know, if they speak with me or anyone else from open contracting world, they kind of know what's OCD contracting data standard. They've heard about different ontologies, they've heard about different standards, you know. But one thing that's missing, and I might not be realistic here, but one thing that I see is missing is this, you know, a guidelines on how to deliver on these recommendations, you know. So like say, okay, would OCDS actually help you do these things? Would capturing a lot more information in e-forms, and how do you structure that information so that you deliver on these recommendations? That would be useful, because, well, my hunch is that many governments would agree that these are good recommendations. Of course, it's a good idea, but the question is, what is that technical guidelines for us to actually deliver on this? So that is a bit of a gap I see. But again, I haven't seen like one platform, one set of guidelines. Maybe I'm trying to oversimplify in my head. Maybe it's not that simple the way I see it, of course. But that is something that I heard from many governments, you know, unclarity about.
Yeah, sure. Both Natalie and Till have their hands up. Till, will you forgive if Natalie comes first, so she has a chance to say hello, and then it's Till after.
Of course.
Hi,
Please,
Natalie. Natalie, we can't hear you, I'm afraid.
Sorry, I unblocked my video and didn't realize I had to unblock my speaker as well. So yes, I found these recommendations very interesting, and I agree with most of them. I mean, the thing is, there's some criticism of the TED data, and I would like to point out that the publications office that produces this data, we have to create this data, we're stuck by the regulation, and we have to publish the information that the contracting authorities provide us with. We cannot change the data. So we're limited by the standard forms that exist. However, I think with the new e-forms, there are more business rules, so there will be a higher degree on the quality of the information that we're provided for. And I think the e-forms set the scene already for providing more information. There is the possibility of providing information of the tenders and not just the winning tenders, which is not the case in the current forms. However, the problem is like these guidelines that are needed and recommendations. It's to get people to provide this information. The possibility is to put the information there, but it's the willingness to provide this information by the member states. Talking about the quality of the data for the amounts provided for the awards, contracting authorities do get reminders that there's a problem here or a problem there. But if they don't provide us with any other data, we do not have a legal position to change the data. So I think,
sense,
you know, sorry?
Yeah, go on, sorry.
No, so I think e-forms will set the scene for getting people to give more information, but we need to find a way to encourage people to give the information. I think this is the big stumbling block.
Absolutely. Do we have an immediate response to the issue of the lack of willingness to provide data? If not, it would be till next in line.
Well, can I just,
of course, jump in, because
because I think that there are two issues. One is whether there's a willingness to provide data, and I think in the vast majority of cases, actually everyone wants to provide the data. I think there are just some small issues, particularly as we've seen in the UK and some in Hungary. I've seen previously where people deliberately don't want to release data. But this is, you know, not common. I think that one of the difficult issues is that the e-forms will make a big step forward, and Natalie is 100% right that the Publications Office is just responsible for making sure that the data that is provided is submitted and published, and everyone's saying, you know, myself included, the TED data is inadequate. Actually, there's a sort of hangover where TED was initially, as it was designed and its inception, was effectively a legal document repository, because that was the right thing at that time, and a global database of tenders was not really an option, especially since so many countries were publishing so much still through paper. And actually, yes, there's a lag in the way that, you know, what we're capable of and what's being published. But we do have to remember that some member states and some of the smaller organizations that are within those member states do not have the skills and the understanding of how to populate e-forms necessarily particularly well. So there is a responsibility for states to recognize that this data is important and to actually sort of encourage their publishers to do a better job. This all sits in Brussels, I think, is, you know, that's a misreading of the situation. I think some of the states have to do a better job, frankly.
So a bottom-up approach of working really in the member states, working up.
I think the most important thing is to recognize that this data is important and to cherish it, and that's why using the data, I think when states use this data, then they realize how important the publication is.
Absolutely.
And if we can, you know, that dog food slide that Oscar was showing is really important. You know, it's like, actually, if you use this data to combat climate, or you use this data for this purpose, then you will publish better data.
Although some might say we might be eating dog food here in the UK post-Brexit in January, so we'll see if that's announced or not. Till, you've been waiting for quite a while.
Stocked up.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Julian. This is basically both a comment on what both Carolis and Natalie and Ian were reflecting on. We do a lot of work with public sector entities on open data, both on a national level, regional level, and municipal level here in Norway. And what we see in general, and my hunch is that it's not that much different in procurement, is that one of the big problems is that data very often resides in systems that are not meant for sharing of data. It's systems that were procured in order to enable processes, business processes in the public administration, which makes it very often very, very hard to extract the data that you want to share, because the systems are often delivered with no APIs to do so. And the data resides in a format that is more or less useless for sharing or publishing. We see very often what we get out is PDF documents or other types of non-machine processable data formats. So I do recognize very strongly the point that Carol has made about how can we provide guidelines also on the technical and the technological empowerment to be able to share data. Because I agree with you, Ian, most of the institutions we collaborate with, they want to share their data, but it's very often it's very difficult and very to extract the data sets that you want to share. So one recommendation that I'd like to put out there is also to use the purchase power of the public entities when they procure their IT systems to have data sharing in mind in future procurement of IT systems. That basically keep in mind all of the 10 other recommendations. So if you buy a new database management system for your contracts, for your invoices, or whatever else business process tools you buy, put in the requirement specification of your systems that data should be accessible and shareable and publishable.
That makes very good sense to me. Natalie, do you want to respond to this because you have your hand up, or did you not just? Maybe you just forgot to put it down.
Yeah, I forgot to put it down. Yeah, I think Ian's done the same thing as well, unless he's perfectly got his hand up. No, I think Till has a good point there. The procuring entities should be encouraged to put in their specifications about data sharing. I think they also maybe have a lack of understanding of how this could be done by the systems, so they need to be maybe a bit more educated on this. I think there's another concern of procuring entities, and that is on data protection. I mean, some countries like Sweden, they publish more information on the contracts they have, but other countries are more resistant on this because, you know, they're not sure how much they, you know, for example, the tenderers that have not been awarded, you know, how much can they say about them? How much information can they give about the tenders? I think there's a lack of knowledge of how far you should be transparent. I mean, I hope we move into a world where things are a lot more transparent, but this is a legacy thing where we're worried about giving information about people that is considered private. Okay. I think it's an evolution thing.
Okay, a learning process. Ian, did you put your hand up?
Yes, just on the point that Till was making, and something that, you know, that thing about data being transferable between systems. We had a meeting in the UK about the national data strategy, and I was talking to a couple of public sector users of systems, and they've been in a situation where they've asked for their data out of their own system that they paid, you know, hundreds of thousands of pounds for, and been told that the data doesn't belong to them, and that they have no rights to access the data schema, so they can't even remodel their own data from backups into a new database. And there's a really there's a sort of quite deep problem here that we need to separate the data that is required for doing business within the public sector across multiple countries from the systems that operate the data, operate on the data. And I think, you know, if procurers aren't able to get this right, we cannot expect our medical teams to get this right. So it would be really interesting to see if we can do something in Europe in terms of research or innovation to look at how we can separate data from systems and use open standards across a range of services for government.
Thanks very much. In adding to this, we have a comment in the chat from David. Thank you very much. David says, one issue that jurisdictions need to get their heads around is that they add a data sharing clause to the requirements, and if that requirement increases their costs, why they should go ahead with it. So that's a fair enough question. So just ensuring that governments understand the value in including that functionality. I think that's a great point. Carolus, you were next.
Oh yeah, just to bring your attention to an example, maybe that we did, because we've identified that problem of EGP system providers not being aware of OCDS, you know, and the question is then how do you integrate OCDS requirements into technical specifications of new EGP systems? So we've developed some guidance, and for example, Lithuania has used this guidance. So now OCDS is part of their technical specifications of the new e-procurement system to be developed in the next 2 years. You know, so all of a sudden we have potential suppliers who want to win that contract, you know, calling us saying, okay, so how do we deliver on that requirement and the technical specifications of the system, you know? So it's only a minor sort of example. It's a good step forward, I think, but that is something, you know, that's how I would see it actually functioning, where you integrate this requirement into the requirements of the system development, updates, upgrade, you name it. And then you place it as a sort of burden on suppliers to deliver.
Exactly what I was thinking about.
Oscar, do you want to add to that? You hand up.
Yeah, I mean, like it was mostly related to this open data sharing clause, and in any case, I mean, like this idea of whether this increases cost or not. And I mean, I know quite well the recommendations that have been done in the context of the Spanish Federation of Municipalities, of local administrations, where in their open data guide that they already delivered 3 years ago, they included a recommendation on including this open data clause or data sharing clause in every single contract. Yeah, we have not made an analysis of how many, I mean, yet, of how many contracts are actually including that one. Yeah, I mean, and this is something that we will be doing probably during the next year, and we hope that, I mean, that it has been adopted by a good number of local administrations. But I think that, I mean, it should increase the cost because, I mean, if you are thinking on how systems are normally being developed nowadays, open data should come by default. I mean, most probably there shouldn't be a real additional cost, except when dealing with legacy systems, yeah, which was the main problem that we were discussing before. Yeah, but I think that we should really try to go. I also understand the barrier that Natalie was commenting, yeah, on producing data. I mean, like, just showing that somebody has not obtained the contract may be a bad sign for a company, but I mean, we all know that sometimes it happens because, I mean, like, well, for whatever reason the bid was not successful, or there were administrative issues or things alike. So I'm not sure whether, I mean, how negative this could be, but I also know that, I mean, at some points in time, for instance, in the case of Spain as well, when producing data about people, contractors, yeah, individual contractors, there is always this issue of the privacy, because the tax number that we use for those contractors is actually the national identification number, which is completely wrong. Yeah, but I mean, that also happened and has led into many discussions on data privacy.
Super, thanks, Oscar. We have a comment from David on an issue that was raised a couple of minutes ago on data publication privacy and how ongoing issues these are, and how they've dealt with that in Canada. If you want to take a look and comment on that. Otherwise, I would have a question. I mean, Ian touched on research and innovation. How do you see the future, and what's the next steps basically in making that happen? And how do you consider the relevance and importance of continued research and innovation on open data that could push towards taking up these recommendations and developing that further?
I mean, from my own point of view, I think we should be looking very, very strongly at the outcomes from procurement. You know, I think TheyBuyForYou quite correctly is about the inputs and understanding the landscape of what's happening in procurement. But we need to, it's completely unrealistic to imagine that we can hit a carbon neutral economies in Europe by 2030 or beyond without addressing the 10-12% of GDP that flows through public contracting, for example. And so I think that if we say, well, look, actually, what do we need from procurement? You know, we need public trust, we need reduced carbon, we need more jobs, dynamic economic growth. If you think about those things, those four things, and you say, well, look, actually, what can we do with public procurement to deliver those things? The first thing you're going to do is end up with the data. And in my mind, if we do the right things, which is to establish goals for public procurement that are achievable, like reducing carbon, engaging small and medium enterprises, then we can define the correct innovation mechanisms and the correct research to deliver those outcomes. If we, and I would genuinely say we can't afford not to, especially in the case of carbon. But if we just say, well, look, actually, we need to keep worrying about public procurement, we're going to end up with a back and forth, like going, oh, well, we're going to blame the suppliers of the systems. I mean, yes, they have a part to play, but we've got to drive beyond that and go, okay, what can we do with what we've got now? And then what do we find unacceptable about the current arrangements, particularly around data? And then act sort of, I think, much more proactively to solve those, because they stand in the way of us being able to deliver the outcomes that we need to deliver.
Yes, very much so. Just to say that David just confirmed in the chat the perspective from North America that yes, what we've said earlier, that legacy systems are just not made or built with the publication side of things in mind, and how difficult it is to do that. Till had his hand up.
One thing I will one thing I will say is, anyone's got a system and they can't get data out of it, come speak to us. We'll get the data out of it. I promise you, we will.
They will
Format it, map it, and yeah, there might be some licensing issues, but we'll get the data out of it.
Super. Till, do you want to add to that?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I saw this discussion about legacy systems and so on going on in the chat. So maybe before my comment, maybe David wants to present his wants to vocalize his comments and points in the discussion. So we can.
Sure. Just 2 seconds. It's not just legacy systems that are a problem. Governments are using more outsourced systems lately. And what we're seeing over here is that those outsourced systems, as much as Ian at OpenOps and I run a similar thing over here in Canada, can scrape them, they're not set up to publish data. So governments are using outsourcing whole systems, and they're outsourcing them based on base requirements, but they're not including data publication. It should be much easier than from legacy systems, but it's just not a part of the feature set they're getting. So it's just a concern that it's not only old systems, it's new ones too, where just no one's asked for it.
Is this just an issue of oversight, or is that deliberate to a degree? I mean, it's probably a mixed bag of everything, but what's your...
We from having conversations with governments over here, it's been oversight. It's not seen as an important piece of functionality. It's not core to getting the procurements done.
Right.
And so it's not required as a base piece, and by the people who are doing the procuring of a procurement system. The data and the analysis that groups like Ian are doing, just other people are handling that, and it's not them, so it doesn't get on the list. I don't think it's generally malicious. It's just not on the list.
Tad depressing. Here we go. Till, where you?
Yeah, no, I just want to say that's my impression too, David. Nobody's asking. Or too few people are asking for the data in the procurement sector compared to other public data that's been made available over the past years or even decades. And here's why I'm getting back to research and innovation. And of course, representing a research institute, I would always argue for, we need more research on that. That's obvious. But anyway, I mean, as Ian said, and I would like to reiterate on that, when starting out TheyBuyForYou, we thought that we could work much more on the analytics side of the data than on the data management side. And look at what we're doing now. We use a lot of things we've been doing, or OpenOps and Ian has been doing in the area of machine learning, is not in order to use the predictive power of machine learning for better procurement process or better decision support. No, it's been on enhancing the quality of the data. So that means when we are talking about big data and the AI revolution that everybody is talking about, we're only scratching at the surface so far with the things we've seen. So basically, we've been too preoccupied with bringing the data into up to a quality level where it starts getting interesting in order to do more advanced analytics. But we can't yet exploit the predictive power of machine learning in order to give good decision support yet, because we don't have the data for quality yet. And even for historic analytics, like for example, getting or using the examples that Ian mentioned, or like getting the average price of 500 meters of motorway in a mountainous area of Europe, which would be interesting, or the average price of renovation in a 5,000 inhabitant town. We can't do this as of yet. So I think much more needs to be done also on the research innovation side in order to be able to run the analytics processes that in other especially industrial areas are already being done, where you have running systems for predictive analytics, predictive maintenance, and so on, and not starting to talk about autonomous systems. So here's a lot to be done once the 10 recommendations that Oscar mentioned actually are in force.
Super, thank you, Till. Does anyone wants to add to that? With the 10 recommendations in mind. And I was curious with the 10 recommendations, Oscar, the very long Christmas wish list. If you had to pick your top 3, what would they be in terms of communicating that clearly, if you had to, just out of curiosity?
Well, I think that, I mean, like, from my point of view, I mean, if I have to pick my own, prefer ones, it's quite clear that the first recommendation on published structured data is really like the key. I think that, I mean, all those that have to do with provide very clear identifiers for those participating in the contracting process I think that that's also a very relevant one. I mean, and we have several of them, yeah, that are working on that. But I think provide identifiers. I mean, we are trapped by strings of characters, yeah, texts that lead us to a lot of ambiguity. And for me, obviously, I mean, but that's also from a personal choice, and for this possibility of really doing added value services using artificial intelligence techniques. The idea of having the raw texts associated to the structured procurement data, I think that is a very relevant one. I mean, I think that there could be a lot of benefit that we could obtain from there. I mean, those are my three preferred choices, let's say. Most probably other people have others, yes, we have seen. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Not good to hear. Any other comments on this or any related issue?
Mm-hmm. I think for myself, we do linking that to what Till was saying about saying, look, obviously the research is important, is actually one of the things that really I don't think people understand is the gap between what is being published and what we could achieve. And so somehow we need to get states to recognize that actually, if they were supporting their teams, if they were making better decisions about the hosted procurement systems they're using or the cloud procurement systems, and we're able to produce much better data, we could make really rapid progress in a number of areas. And the most frustrating thing is that states aren't recognizing this. So anything that closes that gap, I think is really valuable. And I would, one of the values of TheyBuyForYou was being able to really clearly share over multiple countries across the Europe how big that gap was. We just need to go on to the next stage.
Yes, very much so. Just double checking with our audience. Anyone have any questions or comments that haven't been discussed at all yet? We have a couple of minutes to spare. Is there anything you would like to raise, comment, or discuss a bit further, hear more about? Or indeed, I'm asking our panelists if there's anything you feel has been neglected in our discussions. Now is the time to shine.
Well, I'm Cécile Gouache. I could not follow all the discussion, so
hello, Cécile. Very good.
Hello, yeah. But if I can, so first, from what I could hear, I can only agree with all what was said. I joined a bit around 10 minutes ago. I also quite like appreciate the votes on the recommendations. I also think that everything in the same place is a list of our issues. I would have liked to have a bit more focus on the data quality. So it was mentioned in the discussion, but for me a very important aspect is to increase the quality of the data, and for that formalizing the rules that have to be that are needed is an important point, because how can you really measure quality is something that is a bit lagging behind. Sorry. Voilà. So it's a bit what I have to say, but it's really interesting.
Yeah, that ties in with Till's earlier point now, and David mentioned it too, about them just enforcing certain rules and behaviors. Does anyone have, what would the first concrete step be to do that, to get better data quality? If you could voice one wish to governments, what would that be? How would that work?
So for my side, so from the experience I'm doing now, I think it's important that the quality is linked to so assessing quality is about quality for a given use, and quality should be so it should be first structured what we mean by quality, and it should be connected to its use. And if you have you are making an analysis about a given aspect, quality would mean making sure that your data that you need to assess is sufficiently so to define criteria about what it means. So being either sufficiently fed, so you have enough data that you don't find, so you have subtracted outliers, or you have reported these outliers to the owner, the data owner, so that this would be a process of to ensure the quality of the data, and that it would be very transparent how you have transformed the data before you make use of it. So for me, quality goes in these lines here.
Yes, absolutely. Do we have any comments on this? Share anything to add with a view to the future?
None other than full agreement.
Full agreement is good towards the end of a patent discussion, actually.
But don't you think that there should be some governance? Because to me, the problem is to be able to agree also on what quality is. If I am, to be able to use other sources, or sources that you are not owning, you need to rely, to trust your partner. And so for me, there should be something done at, and I don't know in which form. I am just now really brainstorming with you how this trust could be ensured.
I mean, the trust in data sharing ecosystems is an unsolved problem. You have of course some approaches towards this trusted infrastructures, such as, for example, this International Data Spaces Association reference architecture, where the participants of an ecosystem, they have to fulfill certain requirements in terms of both authentication and certification, but also in terms of quality in the software, quality in the data, and data usage policies. So who can use the data that's being shared in the ecosystem, for what period of time, under what terms and conditions, and for what purposes. So we're seeing emerging technological endeavors to secure trust, but this is by far not a solved problem, as are many of the other legal challenges when it comes to data sharing ecosystems. You mentioned, for example, the liability. So what happens if my system is faulty because I use data from Oscar, which is faulty? Who has the liability for that? And not even to touch the question of data ownership, which is at best unclear. If I, for example, license a system, who owns the data in the system, and can I give away, can I share, can I sell data in the system? So the whole issue of data ecosystem is still an object of that needs to be investigated further.
Can I ask you another question? I have a question for you. So for me, it was still, and it's really a personal reflection. I am a bit puzzled. So if I, as a data owner, I publish my data, who is owning the data after it's published? It's really a question I have.
Well, the thing is that it depends on what kind of data. The question of data ownership is very well regulated for personal data. because there the GDPR regulates the data in a way that you as an individual are the data owner. It's much different for industry data, so non-personal data, and even more difficult for machine-generated data, because there are copyright laws and other laws protecting the IP in the data do not count anymore. So it has been discussed in with the European Commission in the context of the European data spaces that are emerging now in the next framework program, whether or not the question of data ownership, especially for industry data, is ripe for a reconsideration or an iteration, because so far the Commission said we really don't want to touch the question of ownership because this is something that the market or the industry could regulate. But what you are addressing is, as of now, a rather unclear concept.
There are two people willing to answer, maybe.
Yes, Oscar, and both Oscar and Ian have their hands up. So I think, Oscar, you were slightly earlier, but I'd leave it to you both to fight over it.
It doesn't really matter, yeah? Okay, no, I mean, like, in my view, I mean, in this very specific context, I mean, Till has defined it very clearly. Yeah? I mean, like, in this context of data spaces where you are joining public data with private data, I mean, there must be very clear rules on the ownership. In our case, I mean, like, when we are talking about public procurement data, most of that data, I mean, in my opinion, is public. So it's data that should be openly done or openly published by the public administrations. And in this case, I mean, for me, the most important, I mean, like, regulation that comes into place, the Open Data Directive, and I mean, like, the previous directives and the corresponding national legislations. So, I mean, in my opinion, this should be always going around the norms and terms that we have already discussed quite a lot in terms of the Open Data Directives or the Public Sector Information Reuse directives. I mean, they should be there. And at most, I mean, you just have to have the attribution. The data ownership is still, I mean, like, who are the ones who are providing data? The data providers are the public administrations, but the data ownership belongs to everybody because they will have open licenses. But I mean, that's for that very specific purpose, yeah? Then, I mean, we then start like moving into company data, yeah? I mean, like, is this an SME or not? And I mean, then we are moving into the registries of companies and things like. Hopefully, they will be open as well, because this is one of those key high-value data sets identified in the Open Data Directive. But we know that there's still some way to go. I mean, like, I'm suffering from it in Spain, yeah? I mean, that where that data is not really open, yeah? Mm-hmm. But probably Ian has a different view, or I mean, a kind of complementary view. I'm not sure. Mm-hmm.
No, I think a complementary view. So in a way, the beauty of open licensing is that it doesn't matter who owns the data. So that in most government cases where you have a crown license or a government license that is open and it allows reuse, then actually who then owns the data doesn't matter, because anyone can take a copy of that data and reuse it for any purpose without fear that they might attract charges or additional recriminating changes. But you have to, in doing so, indemnify the original owner of the data, that whatever changes you make to the data are your responsibility. So I think that where we can publish open data and procurement is one of those areas where literally everything in it can be open. Once you combine it with proprietary data, you have a more complex arrangement. But what we do, and I think that this is, I hope that this could become more prevalent, is that we allow open reuse under certain circumstances. So we augment the data and we give that data away and allow people to reuse that data based on what their purpose of using it is, i.e. they continue to use it openly, then we allow them to use it openly. So researchers and universities access our data for free and reuse it for free. And their only requirement is to cite us as the source of the data. So I think that there are, if we're open-minded about this, we can be quite flexible and we can get past the ownership. One of the problems we have in a lot of the data we collect is that the publishers of the data actually claim copyright. So the systems that are used to publish the data, not the actual publishers, the systems claim copyright over the data, in my mind, erroneously. And I'd like to see more data being openly licensed by default, i.e. even if there's an absence of a copyright, that means it's open. If it is of a certain nature in Europe, then I think that would be, so if it's public procurement data and there is no copyright, or there is an overarching legal requirement that it is published openly, so we can get past this problem. But yeah, does that make sense?
Well, it does. It does to me. Yeah. I was going to ask actually, with a view to the coming months, now that our discussion is drawing to a close, what does the panel think is the most immediate, should be the most immediate concern that should be addressed? What's the most pressing issue? What comes first? What would be your #1 action item in the weeks and months ahead? If you want to combine that with a concluding comment, feel free to do so. All of it. I'm sure all of it. Or any other concluding comments? Or
all of them.
All of them. Okay. All of them plus the 10 recommendations. Surely, I think I have to conclude. We're running out of issues to discuss, and we're not running out of problems to solve. If there is no other comment at this point, I'll conclude our discussion here and thank our 6 panelists, Cecile, Carolis, Ian, Oscar, Till, and Natalie very, very much. And of course, David in Canada, who either got up really early or stayed up really late to join us. So thank you very much. As Till has said in the chat, we will be making the recording of this panel discussion and the presentations available. So, and we will email you about that. Thank you all, and thanks for joining. Thanks for taking the time, and have a great afternoon, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian, and thanks everybody for joining.
Thanks a lot. Yeah. Looking forward to your additional comments. Yeah, if you have any.
Absolutely. Do get in touch if you wake up in the middle of the night and want to add an 11th recommendation. Bye for now. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.